an honor for me to be here, sincerely. I didn't really know what it would be to be here, and I didn't prepare anything. And I had no idea, but I had a lovely lunch with some of you, and I was more or less blown away by what I see happening here. And so I really feel it's exciting what you guys are up to. I thought what I'd do is just give you a little bit of background about me, and then about the lineage or the tradition that I was trained in, and then talk a little bit about what's happening in the United States in yoga and yoga therapy, and the steps we've taken to work towards elevating yoga therapy as a serious and recognized complementary system in Western healthcare. And then I thought we would leave it open to see if there's any dialogue. I did do a lot of educational programs and a lot of professional trainings in addition to research. The most recent event that's a little bit like this was in San Diego last month, where I did a talk like this for the Navy SEALs, which is a different kind of group, interesting group. And so it seemed like they liked that kind of Q&A opportunity. And I know that some of you are involved in this field actively, so Q&A is also appropriate. And then at the end, if we have time and you're interested, maybe we can do a little something in the practice direction. Does that sound okay for you guys? So let's see, how do I begin? I am Gary, and I grew up in the East Coast and was interested from a young child actually in religion. And what you call contemplative studies is very much kind of what my academic background was. I went to Colgate University. Hey, Tim. And I went to Colgate University and ended up in a course on Hinduism in my freshman year. And there was a phys ed requirement. I'm giving you a background. I hope it's not boring you. I mean, I'm just going to give you a little context. So, and I ended up in the phys ed requirement. There was I had watched Kung Fu when I was a kid, and I kind of liked that a lot. And I thought, in fact, I was going to go to China or something. So for the phys ed, I took this karate class, and the teacher for the gym department was a Korean war vet, and he just wasn't my cup of tea at all. But I loved the Hinduism class, and that's where I encountered Patanjali. So my real first introduction to yoga was Patanjali's Yoga Sutras, which is one of the great source texts about the teachings and meaning and purpose of yoga. So in the next semester, I really liked the professor who taught Hinduism. So I took a course on Buddhism, kind of reverse, right? Because for the phys ed requirement, there was a woman who was teaching a yoga class. And of course, it was an asana class, not exactly a yoga class, but she had been living in India for many years with her husband, who was an ethnomusicologist. I don't know if you know about ethnomusicology, but it's the study of his field was studying Carnatic music, which is the classic music tradition of South India. And so she went with him when he first began studying and met Krishnamacharya. And Krishnamacharya, that name you may know. And so she was a student of Krishnamacharya's, and when they came back and he became the chairman of the music department, when he became the chairman of the music department, she decided to offer yoga, and they wouldn't let her teach it in the religious studies department where really it belonged. She taught a physical education class. So I went into that, I don't know how graphic to be, I know this is being recorded. I went into that class, the very first class of asana that I'd ever taken. I'd already been I knew that Patanjali was something for me, I knew that there was something here. And I came out of that asana class, and I was a second semester freshman, living away from home for the first time, eating dormitory food. So I'm going to be a little graphic. I apologize in advance. I just came out of that class and had the most amazing bowel movement that I ever had. And I said, okay. And 6 months later, they took me to India with them, and I was 19 years old, and I met Krishnamacharya, and they had arranged coursework for me because they were taking music students, and I was a religious studies student. So they introduced me to a Shaivite Siddhanta master, which is a South Indian tantric Shaivite lineage, and I studied with him at Madras University this tradition, Shaivite Siddhanta, and I met Krishnamacharya and his son Deskachar, and this was in 1974, and so I just began the study of yoga and the practice of yoga and the study of yoga therapy and the practice of yoga therapy back in the early 1970s. So after 6 months there, I came back to the United States and graduated Colgate, and then I just went back for 2 years. And while my parents said, "What are you doing?" And I'm this kid who grew up just a couple, 100 miles north of here, and no connection to India at all. But I just was gone. I was a good student. I was not a problematic kid, so they didn't obstruct me or anything. And I just went and lived in India for a couple of years and started the serious, deeper study of yoga. I came to learn. I was a gymnast in high school, so I didn't go to yoga for asana at all. I was, I thought then that, oh, that's nothing for me because I was a gymnast, so that could be easy. I realized later that I didn't really understand what asana was and its potential. But I really came to study yoga, to study Vedas. So I began studying with them, and I started learning in India Sanskrit. Then I'll jump ahead. 2 years after I came back from India, I enrolled in a PhD program at University of California, Santa Barbara, where I was studying Sanskrit. So I'd already started that. But I went to India to study. We started studying Upanishads, Bhagavad Gita, Yoga Sutras, in the traditional way. So I would sit and my teacher would chant and I would repeat until I by-hearted a text before they would talk meaning. And back then in the mid-1970s, 76, 77, Deskachar said to me, I got accepted at University of California to matriculate in 78, after I returned from 2 years in India. And he said, you're too young to study religion, you need to study Western medicine. And I'm going to just go through this quickly. And I was like, why should I study Western medicine? I'm studying Sanskrit, I want to study Vedas. He said, because in the future, you're going to be bringing yoga therapy into the context of Western healthcare. And I didn't really understand what he was talking about, but he was my teacher, so I did go to the university and study Sanskrit, but I also began teaching myself anatomy and physiology, and it turned out that I started getting students, and then I started getting students who were chiropractors and physical therapists and nurses, and then they started referring people to me. And so when I finished graduate school, I actually quit. I'm ABD, which is all but dissertation. I have a master's degree, but I'm all but dissertation in my PhD, because I was really more interested in working with people. And back then in the religious studies department, the issue was hermeneutics, which I don't know if you know what that is, the philosophy of interpretation. And there was a big fight in the religious studies department. And I had a professor who was an extraordinary being. I'm sure that your friend David will know him, Raimundo Panikar. And he was at the world level in interfaith dialogue. And anyway, so I had those kinds of very profound teachers who were not just academics, but they were practitioners. And I wanted to be more engaged with practice. So I opened a business, it was called Maui Yoga Therapy in 1981. I lived in Maui for 30 years. And I was just doing one-on-one, what I would call inaccurately patient care. I was just not teaching yoga classes, just seeing individual students until my teacher said, you have to start training teachers, then you have to start training therapists. And so yoga therapy for me began in the 70s, and because I was trained that way, Krishnamacharya, so Deskachar and Krishnamacharya are in this familial lineage that is traced back to the 9th century. The master was named Nathamuni, and Nathamuni was from a town in deep South India. And he's known for certain texts that he wrote, one called Yoga Rahasya, which means secrets of yoga. And in Yoga Rahasya, he presents the yoga teachings and explains using the word Viniyoga, which is an older term that appears in Hinduism and in ancient yoga and in ritual and in Ayurveda. It means something like to differentiate the context. Like I'm teaching or talking in a university here, right, to I don't know, faculty and students, and that's the context, and then adapting the tools. So Viniyoga means to differentiate, adapt, and apply appropriately. And he brought this word into the context of yoga sadhana and said that all of the practices need to be adapted to match the needs of the individual, what their needs are structurally, physiologically, emotionally, what their interests are, what stage of life they're in. All of the practices need to be adapted. And so that's the sort of ancestral sort of orientation of this tradition. Krishnamacharya always taught that these practices are not about the practices. These practices are about the practitioner. So I explained at lunch to my friends that we had lunch together. As an example, a lot of the modern concept of asana practice is that there's a right way to do a posture, and as an asana practitioner, your job is to do the postures correctly, and that your job as a teacher is to teach your students to do the postures correctly, which is sort of common sense the way we think about it in the yoga group think. But Krishnamacharya said that's just actually a fundamental misunderstanding of all of these tools. They're not about the postures, are not about the postures, they're about the practitioner. The role of the student is to use the postures to understand what's happening, and it's really primarily structure with asana, to find out what's happening in their structure, and then adapt the movements to access their bodies in the way that they need to access them in order to improve their alignment, create stability and appropriate range of motion in their joints, strengthen the weak muscles, release chronic contraction in the muscles that are chronically contracted, and most importantly, identify dysfunctional movement patterns and transform them, create what we call in Western exercise physiology and physical therapy, neuromuscular reeducation. So, they taught me that, and when I was young, they taught me the yoga therapy, which is beyond just the asana. I'm going to explain that now. When I was young and I started teaching, a lot of the work I did was asana practice, and I actually made my initial living on Maui. I earned income from helping refugees from other yoga traditions who had injuries. I won't name which ones. You can know, if you know, you'll know. And then also hula dancers. Really, and then some ballet dancers. But there were a lot of what we call howlies. You know what a howlie is? I lived 30 years there, so I'm what they call kama aina. So I went there when I was young, and sort of my young adulthood was there. That's where I began my yoga career. So a lot of people that would go to Hawaii wanted to study hula dancing. And there could be, let me not say this incorrectly, I'm older so I can say it now, right? Middle-aged housewives who have no background in dance show up in Maui, and the original hula dancing was in halaus, and it was like a martial system. The training was very rigorous, kind of like, same thing, the other group one I'll mention was the Ashtanga yoga people. Have you heard of them? So Ashtanga yoga was taught by Krishnamacharya to Pattabhi Jois. Now he's teaching 40-year-old, 50-year-old people this system which was designed for training teenage Brahmin boys. So they would get injuries, and that's how I started making a living. I bought land and built a house on Maui on income earned from injured Ashtangis, and this is actually an historical fact. Injured Ashtangis, injured hula dancers, a couple of ballet dancers. And then I started getting more and more students who were chiropractors and physical therapists, and even a couple of orthopedic guys who used to say, your career is great for my business, but I'm kind of interested in what you have to say about this. And then also my father's golf buddies. This is when I was in my 20s, and they had sacrum problems and hip problems. And as I matured, people started telling me that they weren't sleeping well, they had pain issues, they had headache problems, they had stress. Some of them had, I started getting some clients with irritable bowel syndrome, and then even one of my early clients had a significant scoliosis plus inflammatory bowel. She had Crohn's disease, it was an inflammatory bowel condition. And so I went back to India to study more deeply in the yoga therapy, more about the physiology. And they taught me that really this breath work is a sympathetic, parasympathetic activator. That we can create a conscious relationship in asana with our spine and with our movement patterns. And that we can do neuromuscular reeducation. But not only that, with breath awareness, we can create a conscious relationship with our sympathetic, parasympathetic system, our autonomic nervous system. And most of us are in chronic states of sympathetic, parasympathetic dysregulation. Most of our diseases, in most of our diseases, there are cases of sympathetic, parasympathetic dysregulation, most of our physiological conditions that people are suffering from. And most of the pharmaceuticals that are prescribed to manage symptoms of these conditions are sympathetic, parasympathetic activators. And they taught me that there's a science of breath, it's a little bit technical. We'll see if we do something here today and how much detail I give you, of course. But there's a way of beginning to understand inhalation and exhalation and the relationship between inhale and exhale, what we call ratio, and holding the breath in or holding the breath out. And the way you valve the flow of breath like, for example, the ujjayi that we use in asana, which the effect is called ushna, means heating, or the shitli, which is cooling. So some conditions have systemic heat, some conditions lack heat. So they taught me about this, we call it Brahmana Langana idea, which is kind of the yin-yang, not exactly, of Ayurveda and yoga therapy, and how to influence autonomic function, and via the autonomic nervous, through the respiratory system, influencing autonomic function, and through the autonomic nervous system influencing digestion, cardiovascular rhythms, hormonal balance, even supporting immune function. So there was this whole training in sort of yoga therapy in relation to helping people understand and gain an ability to influence in self-care, through self-care, their own autonomic nervous system, and via their autonomic nervous system, the rest of their physiology. So I'm working with these people, and I'm getting older, and I get married. I'm going to, I hope this is okay. I'm just talking extemporaneously. So before I got married, I only had some ideas about how painful life can be. And then after I got married, I had another level of understanding. And then, having been married for a few years, I had a son, and I had another level of understanding. And then a few years later, a decade later, I got divorced. So you see, as I matured, and then I got diagnosed, by the way, with a brain tumor. That's another discussion. So, but as I aged and matured, more and more of the students who came to me were talking to me about their emotional problems and their relationship issues and their fear of end of life. And so I went back to India and learned more. I started studying more about that science, and we're still into the late 1980s at this point. I started learning more about the science of meditation. And there's a lot of talk about meditation now. There's a lot of medical and physiological studies on the relationship between meditation and the brain. That's because of the great work of mostly Buddhist teachers. So when I was living on Maui in the early 1980s, there was a Tibetan Buddhist center established by a great teacher named Kalu Rinpoche. I know there's a big Tibetan scene here. I don't know how many of you know about Kalu Rinpoche, but he was Shampa Kagyu. So it's in the lineages of the Kagyu, which is the Karmapa and so forth, which is different than the Nyingma lineages that you told me David is in. But Kalu Rinpoche was this great master who the last Karmapa called out of the mountains and told him, you can't live in isolation, you have to go. And he opened 400 Buddhist centers around the world, and one of them was on Maui. And they sent a Lama, and if you see that book, you can maybe hold the picture of Lama Tenzin. He's a personal friend of mine. He was the Lama that they sent over. And so that they sent over, and he invited me. I was on the board of directors of this Buddhist society for 20 years in Maui. And I was learning meditation in India, and then I started, that's Lama Tenzin, and I started studying Tibetan Buddhist meditation and started seeing that these are a similar science. That is, the Himalayan yoga tradition, meditation science, is not well understood or known in the American yoga community. There are certain lineages, like at Yogaville, Swami Shivananda was a meditation master, so there are certain lineages that understand the science of meditation, but it's still in the context of like the Hindu religion. What Krishnamacharya, because of Vinaya Yoga and Nathamuni's teaching, said is that this meditation is for everybody. And it isn't about the meditation techniques. And it isn't even about the, if you look in the tantric yoga science of meditation, it isn't even about the deities. When you do deity yoga, I don't know if you know, if you study Tibetan Buddhism, you'll know about deity yoga. They're not about the deities. It's like depth psychology, if you know what depth psychology is, which is the sort of investigation of these sort of subconscious and then transpersonal forces that influence us and shape how we think about ourselves in the world, how we emote in our relationships, and how we make choices and behave in the world. So for me, it was like a study of depth psychology. Meditation was a science of depth psychology. And so my teacher started saying, now when people are having, Did I hear something? Oh, that was a telephone. So I'll explain it. I'll explain it in a second. So they started teaching me the science of meditation. So you can see that I learned, and then part of meditation rolls into this science of the deeper science. It's called Laya Yoga. And it uses symbol systems like chakra sadhana. You may have heard of the chakras. There's a lot of information out there in the American yoga scene about chakras that has nothing to do with the traditional view. Doesn't mean it's not useful, but I was trained in a very traditional science. So there's chakras and there's deities. So if you think about, for example, what we mean by depth psychology, there are subconscious impulses. And these subconscious impulses come from our conditioning. The Vedic people call it samskara. My teacher said that the most important purpose in yoga is to surface your samskaras, your patterns, your conditioning, so you can become free of it. Even movement patterns, like I said at lunch, if you do an asana practice and you're not critically self-conscious of your movement patterns, your movement is going to reinforce your movement patterns. So you might get stronger, but reinforce dysfunctional patterns. So the idea is all samskara at every level we want to surface and become free from. And these samskaras are formed from our genetics, our biological imperatives, our biodata, our family personal life and our relationships with our family as we grew, our peeps, our sociological conditioning, and then there's something else, maybe transpersonal, or maybe what the yogis call prarabdha karma from past lives. So we all have these deep, unconscious impulses that drive us and that influence how we perceive and how we act in the world. So what my teacher said is that this meditation is for that. It's to help you surface and transform. So the chakra model, for example, in Laya Tantric Yoga is a way of accessing these inner impulses. And the deity yoga is working with, so the chakras are internal symbols. The deity, like say we call them microcosmic symbols. The deities are macrocosmic symbols. Doesn't mean that they're not real when I say symbols, by the way. That's another discussion. But they're macrocosmic symbols that relate to these transpersonal forces that we can access. And what the tradition says is these potentials that are symbolized by the deities are inherently already there within us, but they haven't been activated. So they have complex meditation methods that use chakras and that use deities to help us transform and actualize our potential as human beings. So it took me, from 74 when I met them, till probably close to the year 2000 to really fully receive all of these teachings and be mature enough to begin to integrate them in my system. And then along the way, there's been some interest in the West in establishing some principles about yoga therapy. So I had some students, one of them is a guy named John Kepner, and some of my colleagues, Richard Miller, I don't know if you guys know Richard and Larry Payne, they were sort of students in my lineage, but younger than me they're older than me, both of them, but they're younger than me in the tradition. And they had sort of started with a guy named Georg Furstein. This is just history now, the International Association of Yoga Therapists. And then John, who graduated as a therapist from my program, he had the energy and the understanding to take what Richard and Larry Payne started, International Association of Yoga Therapists, and bring it to another level. So where we are now as a community is International Association of Yoga Therapists has these conferences. The first one that they had was in LA, and I gave the keynote when I said that if we're going to establish a field of yoga therapy, we have to define the true knowledge base that yoga therapy is drawn from, create a definition of yoga therapy in the context of modern healthcare, discuss the scope of practice, the core competencies of a therapist, and the minimum standards of education. And those guys took it and ran with it. So now they've published standards. They also created a journal, IJYT, which is International Journal of Yoga Therapists, which is a peer-reviewed journal now. And so there are ongoing kind of articles about different things going on in the country in yoga therapy. And they've laid out the minimum standards of education. And now they've even gone to the 2 stages beyond. They've now accredited, I think now there's 21 programs in the United States that are now accredited by IAYT to teach authentic yoga therapy. And now they've done one step further, which is to credential yoga therapists. So there are now IAYT recognized certified yoga therapists. And so the idea is that we need to sort of build a foundation for this profession to be sort of understood and recognized in the West. And it's really, to me, it's an extraordinary science of self-care that is literally useful for everybody. I mean, maybe somebody in a coma is not going to be able to use it. You know what I mean? Or a little infant, but everybody else is going to benefit from understanding how to utilize these tools to manage their own condition, to help them reduce their symptoms of suffering and begin to actualize what their potential is as a human being. And the tools include movement. That's what we call asana practice. Although for us, it's really very much less about form-centric movement. It's much more about breath-centric movement. Even to access the structure at a more subtle way and mobilize your intervertebral bodies and create the space that you need to transform your structural condition. It's more breath-centric than pranayama, which is this profound science of respiratory control that's pretty unique to Vedic India. That you don't see in Qigong. There's some breath practices. There are other movement practices. Asana is very organized and sophisticated, and it's a profound science. But there's nothing like pranayama in any other tradition. Tai Chi has interesting movements, and Qigong has interesting breathing techniques. But pranayama is extraordinary science. Then the science of language, particularly using the voice, chanting, and then mantra. It's a very powerful tool that the ancients developed to a very sophisticated level. And then this art and science of meditation. I want to say something about the meditation as well. The starting point, so is this okay still? So let me step back. So for us, this is a way I articulate it just to organize it for people, if I'm teaching people who don't have background in yoga. What we're doing is cultivating a conscious relationship with our spine via the breath in asana practice, and through our spine, the rest of our functional anatomy. What we're doing with breath-centric asana and pranayama is cultivating a conscious relationship with our autonomic nervous system, and via the breath, and through the autonomic nervous system, our other physiological processes. What we're doing in meditation, it starts by cultivating a conscious relationship with attention. So what we say in yoga is that, like there's a wire here, and on the wire electricity is flowing. Attention is like a wire. The Sanskrit word that we use is nadi. So attention is like a channel, and what flows on attention is awareness. You channel your awareness through attention. In order to master the mind, which is what I was taught is the real goal of yoga, you need to start by mastering the field of attention. Most of us have the conditioning of distraction and attention. When we're healthy, we have a fluctuation of distraction and attention. So the starting point in meditation is what they call dharana in yoga. It's a little bit what the Buddhists call shamatha, like mind training. Calm abiding is the translation of shamatha. So dharana is that idea of the ability to hold the mind in one place without distraction over successive periods in time. That's just the beginning. That opens it. And then the next step is if we can focus, we have to begin to purify the instrument of perception. Because the reality is that most of us perceive our lives, the world around us, and even ourselves through the lens of our own conditioning. And we're unconscious most of all of our conditioning. So we all have a cognitive bias and unexamined ideas. Does anybody understand what I mean by that? If you just turn on the news and you can see. I won't go into that, but you turn on one channel and it's one story, and another channel it's another story, and each one is telling a narrative, and they believe that, and these days they even criminalize if they don't agree with the narrative, but let's not even go into politics. Do you understand what I'm saying? So we're all telling ourselves a story about ourselves and the world around us. So we have to begin to purify ourselves of our ideas, and this is a very interesting discussion to start to examine your unexamined ideas and your self-concepts. So we're taught, so the starting point is to be able to train the mind and focus the mind. And then the next step is to be able to do some deep self-reflection and ask ourselves, why is it that we do what we do? Why do we make the choices we make? Why do we feel the way we feel? Why are we having emotional reactivity in relation to this or that? Start to examine that and then do the work of transformation. So this dharana, dhyanam, and samadhi, this what we potentially call samyama, this integrated use of meditation science, is really not about the meditation. Just like the asana is not about the asana, the pranayama is not about the breath practices. The meditation is not about the meditation techniques. And if you use deity yoga, it's really not about the deities. It's about you. It's about you understanding and transforming yourself at a multidimensional level. So we're multidimensional beings. So I know that when I do an asana, it will influence my physiology and it will influence my emotions. If you look at disease processes, someone can have a condition, let's just make something up, like I've had people who have chronic low back pain, and that chronic low back pain becomes a causal factor in anxiety, and that becomes a causal factor in irritable bowel syndrome. So it's the back pain that caused it. Somebody else has it, irritable bowel syndrome or an inflammatory disease, let's say from genetics, and inflammatory bowel disease. But chronic inflammatory bowel disease is also a factor a causal factor in their anxiety and a causal factor in their back pain. So it can start in the back, or it can start in the mind, or it start in the physiology. But we're multidimensional, so it can start wherever it starts. It's going to influence you at a multidimensional level. So the techniques are like that as well. If I'm doing asana, it's going to influence my emotion and my physiology. But asana is really not about that. It's about the structure. Do you hear what I'm saying? Pranayama will influence your mind and your physiology, and even your anatomy. So these tools are multidimensional. What we're taught is we want to take people into what they call an integrated practice. So you're doing a practice that's multidimensional. You're doing movement and breath and meditation and chanting and prayer, if you're open for that. And some of these tantric kind of ritualized practices, that's the complete integrated practice, to work with yourself at a multidimensional level. Is that making sense to you guys? So this is kind of the introduction. So where we are in scope of practice and training yoga therapists is a thorough study of the science of asana and its relationship to the human body. And not studying asana doesn't mean learning all the postures. It means understanding the human body and how to stretch and strengthen. What we want in the structure, again, is alignment, stability, range of motion, symmetry, resilience in the musculature, functional movement patterns, and studying in detail the techniques of inhalation and exhalation and the science of combining inhale and exhale in different ratios and the different valving techniques to influence the Surya Chandra, we call it the heating, cooling, etc. And then see how to apply them in relation to what's going on in your system, physiologically, even emotionally. The science of chanting, how changing pitch or changing volume changes the effect of the chanting. Then how about chanting with meaning, and how that meaning, like neuro-linguistic reprogramming kind of, how the chanting can actually help you change your story and help you stop identifying with things that bring you down, stop the downward spiral, like the chronic illness symptom cycle, and start an upward spiral, how you can use chanting to connect the potentials that exist within you that you haven't yet activated, and how you can find happiness. My teacher used to say, your fundamental dharma is to be happy. Your fundamental dharma is to be happy. That's how you measure. If you're doing the right practice, if you're really doing the right practice, you're going to feel better, you're going to have more energy, you're going to sleep better, you're going to be more tolerant of others, you're going to be less judgmental, you're going to be less attached materially, and you're going to be fundamentally happier. So if you're not, examine your practice. If you have more pain in your body, if you're more self-righteous, more judgmental, more intolerant of others, you're not doing the right practice. Right? And the thing I think what's special, maybe I'll just say one more thing and see if you have any discussion about Krishnamacharya's teachings, is he said, our job is never to turn people into something that they're not. It's to help them access who they truly are. The Chinese have this beautiful expression, nothing that enters through the front gate can be a family treasure, meaning the treasure is already inside everyone's heart. And so our job is to help them access that, access their own potential. So he never asked people to eat a certain way or to do this or that posture or to believe this or that. He always was like functioning like a mirror to help people reflect and really uncover what's true for them and help them find the practices that will help them get more deeply connected to who they already are as human beings. So it's a very open system, very comprehensive system, and the yoga therapy that he taught very much empowers people to manage their own health care at this multidimensional level. I'm just, like I said, just talking extemporaneously, so that's an introduction. Does it make sense to you guys? In my work, like I said, I started helping people with their back problems, and then their sleep, and then their divorce, and then, and now the kind of people that come are people that are just off the street. They have no background in yoga, people that have been teaching yoga or even training yoga teachers for a long time. I have a lot of graduates who are a lot of nurses and psychologists, but also chiropractors, lots of physical therapists, occupational therapists. We have about a half a dozen psychiatrists that have done our training program, not many medical doctors, 2 or 3. We have a neurosurgeon who's doing it right now. He's in the program right now, neurosurgeon. Like I said, we had some Navy SEALs. It's an interesting cross-section. We have people that come to our training and find themselves returning to the Catholic Church, finding themselves rediscovering their Judaism. I even have people that, we've had people that have come from Asia and Japan and all over Europe. We have a guy right now from Egypt, and he's a Muslim. What this yoga does is take people deeper into who they are. So it's not that they're becoming something different. They're becoming more deeply connected to what speaks to their own hearts. Okay, I can continue babbling forever, but let's see. Does this make sense to you? Let me see what else I want to say. Do I want to say anything else? I mean, one of the hard things to say in public, but here I am saying it, is that this is an authentic tradition. There's been a little, when we started with IAYT, I said when we had the first sort of meetings, I said, there's going to be 2 challenges. One is distinguishing yoga therapy from yoga. And the other is distinguishing yoga therapy from Western healthcare. Because already then what we had was yoga teachers who say, well, I'm a yoga teacher, and yoga's therapeutic, so therefore I'm a yoga therapist. They didn't realize that yoga therapy is a subset of yoga, but it's a different skill set. It's the clinical application of these tools to work with specific and varying conditions. There's science to it. And it's an ancient tool. It's not something that you can just make up. I mean, you can make it up, obviously, but it's not something that's just made up. And then the distinction between yoga therapy and Western healthcare, we had a lot of people early on in the emergence of yoga therapy who were physical therapists or psychologists who said, well, look, I'm a therapist and I love yoga, so I can create yoga therapy programs. And they can, but it's not the tradition of yoga therapy. So that's a little bit of a harder part in my dharma, is not to judge anything else, but to just try and at least in a cooperative way say, but these are the traditional teachings of yoga therapy, and then we'll see what works better. I mean, I think that there are some great systems that are modern that are a mix of different things. But I want to be sure that in my personal Svadharma, it's really to share the authentic yoga teachings, the way they were transmitted through the lineage that I was trained in, and how the yoga therapy science evolved in India, alongside of Ayurveda, but it's a slightly different tradition. And then I think together we can do just an extraordinary work. I don't think that because it's not an authentic yoga therapy tradition, traditionally doesn't mean it's not useful. I think they are very useful. So I have a small piece in this. My piece is really, this is the Krishnamacharya's lineage of yoga therapy and how it works. And we've done, like I said, I can't remember if I said that, we've done the back pain study, we did the lung cancer study, we did the stress management study, we've done the generalized anxiety disorder study. I mean, we keep doing things, the stress management, I said that, to just illustrate to Western healthcare that there's something real here. And that's why I'm so excited about you guys, because you're right in it and you know it and you're doing it. So I said to them, use me if you can. One of the things that I have a skill at is sequencing and creating interventions for different kinds of conditions, because that was one of Krishnamacharya's great mastery, like to be able to really see how to pick which tools for which person for which condition. Although, having said that, we do a lot of therapeutic groups. Good work, in groups, because people who have conditions, especially, chronic conditions, chronic pain or fibromyalgia, something like that, they also have this other phenomenon, which is psychosocial isolation. And also because a lot of the doctors, especially before, don't understand these conditions. In the old days, at least, I don't think they still do it, say it's all in your head. So their families don't understand them. They look fine, but they feel terrible, so they're isolated because their families don't understand them. So getting them together with other people that have similar conditions has been very important for their own healing. So within the context of a therapeutic group, often we'll give individuals specific things for their unique condition, but there's a lot of progress that they can make together as a group. I said I'll say one last thing, but I'm going to say now this I promise will be one last thing. The other thing is that Krishnamacharya taught that as we age, we have different needs, and we also have different interests. And the tradition of Nathamuni says in the first 25 years of life, a lot of the practice is to help us grow in a balanced way, develop strength, develop discipline, develop focus, develop moral character, etc. In the middle stage of life, it's less about that. It's more about maintaining the health we have, protecting our systems as we move through life. But then at the end of life, we should resolve unresolved issues and turn our attention to the end of life and get ready for, I think I told you that when I was 19, they told me the purpose. Did I tell you that? The purpose of yoga was preparing for death. So they also had a whole teaching about meditations to help prepare us for end of life. And that's something that my teacher told me before he died. Now, he told me about 10 years ago, because when I was a kid, I think I told you that I was too young to study religion. Now he said, it's important that you bring this end of life teachings to your student base. Because they believe, their metaphysic is that when we die, it's not over. And what happens after we die is based on the momentum we've created in this life. And that's been interesting. I was kind of shy to do it, and 2 years ago at IAYT in Reston in Washington, I did a keynote on the end of life. And so now John is asking me to come back and do it again this summer, actually. Something like it, different. Because this stuff is deep. And this contemplative field, really that whole, yoga is part of the great contemplative tradition. And when I was in graduate school, I don't know if I told you this, I don't think I was in religious studies, my approved dissertation topic was the relationship between health. Remember when this was? This was like 1976, when you were talking about fighting with the hospital. I remember in academia, fighting with the religious studies department on my dissertation topic, which was the relationship between health and religion. And in the 70s, they thought I was nuts. So I was a little ahead of my time, I think, in that. And then I aborted it anyway, although I did my master's thesis on the relationship between health and religion with a focus on yoga. But now we see that, medicine and health and spirituality are one thing. If we can see them in an integrated way, which is why I'm so excited here, because you guys are doing the medical side and you're doing the contemplative side, and it's all about helping us grow and become more healthy. So it's just beautiful. I'm, again, so very impressed with what you guys are up to. Okay, I'm done. Well, that part. Are there any discussions, comments, questions? Was it okay? Yes? They want to record this?
Yeah, this helps for the recording of the questions in the mic, too.
Thank you so much for being here. A question I have is, so life is preparing for death and that transition, but also during the course of life, part of our purpose or part of what we can be doing is to root out all causes of suffering and try to liberate and free ourselves and hopefully try to benefit others towards their liberation as well. Just kind of thinking along the lines of perhaps like the ACE study.
Which study?
It's called the Adverse Childhood Experiences Study. And what it shows is that, well, they come up with 10 different types of adversity that children can experience. Of course, there's more than that. But a person who, say, has an ACE score of 6, who's had at least 6 types of their kinds of adversity that they score for, has a life expectancy that's shortened by 20 years. So it's less than, much less than the average life expectancy. And so, the greater the suffering, the more somatically it's experienced, the more physiologically we're compromised. And so I'm just kind of thinking about for people who, have experienced various forms of trauma, especially early on, thinking about what tool, like, of course, you were describing the tools and the skill sets, but just knowing that so much of the human population is dealing with basically childhood trauma. So I'm just a little bit curious as to I'm not sure how we can alleviate that, or what we can do so less people are having that type of adversity so early on.
It's a huge question. Huge. It's a huge reality, right? So let me talk around it just a little bit. First of all, the idea in yoga therapy is a subset of yoga. Yoga therapy has more short-term goals. The goal of yoga is freedom, liberation, something. But the foundation insight of yoga therapy, which comes from yoga, comes from what they call Vedic revelation. You know what the word revelation means. So revelation means that the Sanskrit word is aparusheya. It means no human author. So it's not like some really smart man or woman figured this stuff out and wrote it down. It was that they went into their own inner stillness, and in that stillness, the truth was revealed to them. Like Moses going up to Mount Sinai, that's revelation, right? So the Vedic revelation that's foundational to yoga therapy is who all of us truly are. So the metaphysics of it appears prior to Patanjali and Sankhya. They create this notion of a dualism of materiality and consciousness. But so Prakriti and Purusha, if you know about this sort of metaphysical dualism, it's a more like an epistemological dualism. This is academia, right? So I can say things like that. Not an ontological dualism, but that's another discussion. So who we truly are is Atman. That's the Vedic word. The Sankhya yoga term for Atman is Purusha. An easy translation of it is pure awareness, what we call pure awareness. The unchanging source of pure awareness, unaffected by changes in the material world. So first of all, helping people connect more deeply to that part of them that's unchanging, that isn't plugged in and identified even to the trauma. That's a foundation for me as a therapist. When I see someone who has whatever they have, I know that they're not their diagnosis, they're not their trauma, they're not their illness or their mental condition. They are themselves the unchanging source of pure awareness. So my fundamental role, besides helping them manage their symptoms, helping them sleep better, etc., my fundamental role is to help them to connect to who they truly are. And I have to know that they are that. Because my teacher used to say you can't give what you don't have. So if you're not rooted in that yourself, you can't be of great service to someone in that direction. That's number one. Number two, there's a relationship between consciousness as pure awareness, that's Atman or Purusha, and this materiality, this physical body, all of this Prakriti, what we call. That phrase in Vedic teachings is prana. Prana is this kind of mysterious force. Like I'm using this lavalier, and now I'm not going to upset you guys back there, but now what I've done is I've turned it off. So the structure is still here, but it's not animated, it's not activated. There's no life in it. Now there's life. It's animated, it's activated. So this is what we call prana shakti, so life force. And everybody has it. And part of our job is to root them in who they truly are, and another part of our job is to provide for them tools that help them see that they can rebuild their prana shakti. We deplete our own vital energy by our lifestyle, by our incessant internal dialogue, by eating the wrong things, by exercising too much or exercising not enough, by not sleeping well. That unhealthy lifestyle that we live, that depletes our energy. So what we want to do is help people who have been traumatized start to feel their energy again, start to build their prana shakti, and then help them connect to who they truly are. Now that's a difficult thing to do when they're 6 or 15, or they're so far gone that they're not ready to take responsibility for their own condition. So a yoga therapist won't work on their own with people in these conditions. They'll work with professional healthcare providers because different people who've been traumatized are at different stages in their own condition, right? So we can support them. I mean, I think that the best thing that any of us can do is to build our own prana shakti, to become more deeply rooted in who we truly are, so we can, let me borrow a turtle phrase, we can live by example. We can't, my teacher said you can't give what you don't have. If you don't have it, you can't give it. So we need to do our own work, and as parents, we need to do that work so that we model for our children. As teachers in schools, we need to do our own work so we model for our students. This is a big sociological issue. I think that yoga has a tremendous role in the future, not only in therapy and in health and fitness, and also in therapy and self-care, but also in this issue of personal growth and transformation. And you see that the lack of this in our current political world, in interfaith, cross-cultural miscommunication and strife, because people aren't getting rooted in the truth of who they are. So I think we have a big job. Trauma work is very specialized. To do work with individuals who have been traumatized, you need even in yoga therapy, we offer specialized training for people to do that. And then it has to be done in cooperation with. But like you said, there are these adverse situations impact us. The way they impact us is because of that, I don't want to, this may be superficial, but that feels psychoneuroimmunology. That idea of the relationship between our emotions and our immune function. And so when we have trauma, it stores in our system in different ways. And the same trauma can impact 3 different people in 3 different ways. So
Generation.
Yes, also that. Well, that's what we call miasm. But this is a shaman. You guys don't know about him. But if you don't know about him, he's hidden. He's wearing sunglasses. So I withdraw. But so what our job is to understand how someone has been impacted by their trauma, at what level, and then to find a doorway in to work with them. Whatever they're open, it doesn't really matter, because once you start, the whole system can be influenced positively, but there may be, because of the critical nature of their condition, there are certain areas you have to handle first. But again, I hope I'm responding to you. Because it's a very complicated issue. Trauma is a very complicated issue. But I have worked for years, decades, with people who have all kinds of trauma. And it's effective for those who are strong enough to begin to do something for themselves. Sometimes they're too weak. What my teacher used to say is, if you're stronger than your disease, then we can purify you first and then rebuild you. If your disease is stronger than you, then we have to strengthen you up first before we can purify you. If you can sort of extrapolate from that, with trauma, it just depends on how deep the trauma is, how impacted they are, whether we first try to build their confidence, build their self-esteem, build their prana shakti, and then help them work through their attachment and identification, or how we begin depends upon where they are. Does this make sense?
Yes, thank you.
Made sense?
I kind of have a response to that as well, because I think one of the most important places that we can be, if you're practicing yoga and mindfulness in clinical practice, in regards to the ACE study, is with new parents and with pregnant women, because helping them access the autonomic nervous system in a way that they can be mindful in their care of their newborn, in the development of the fetus, I think that those changes can actually influence the development of the fetus and the
In
child.
utero, what?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Well, I mean,
The Indians definitely say that. The Vedic people definitely agree with that.
yeah, well, just in how it changes the autonomic function
Yeah.
of the mother, you would think that might influence the fetus, although I don't know the science behind it. But I do think that in clinical practice, those are great places to start in helping other people find mindfulness and how they relate to themselves and others.
Yeah. I mean, I think what one of you said is that it's so important to bring this into the curriculum at medical schools so that the healthcare providers themselves understand self-care. right? And then they can model that and empower their patients to do it. But then it's the parents, the teachers, the pregnant women. Yeah, so we agree about that. But sorry for the bumper sticker, shit happens. So a lot of the work we do as yoga therapists is the shit's already happened. So now we're helping people manage their own condition and emerge so that they have less and less. But the motto of my teacher's yoga therapy school when they first opened it was Heyam Dukkam Anagatam. And that's a Sanskrit from Yoga Sutras. It means that suffering which has not yet come, it's coming. You can prepare yourself for it, minimize it, and be ready for it when it arrives. If you take the right steps, you can strengthen your system, you can increase your tolerance, even like when we talked about pain today. Pain, sometimes we can eliminate pain. Often we can't eliminate, we can only reduce it. Sometimes we can't even reduce it, but what we can do is build someone's endurance to tolerate it. So there's all different levels that we can work at, and it just depends where someone is, when they come to us. There's a lot of work that we can do. And we need you guys. We need what we've done in the West now with Western medicine and Western educational systems is accelerating the potential of this work reaching more people. And so it's really, this marriage to me is really important. And I'm 100% supportive of what you guys are up to, really sincerely. Anything else? Should we do something or should we just end? You want to do something? Okay. All right. So, obviously we're in these chairs and stuff. So what I think I can do with you is just let me take you on a little sort of guided meditation with some breath practices. You want to do some chanting? Are you guys open for something? All right. Okay. So let's just start, and all you need to do is sit a little bit forward so that you're not leaning on the back of your chair, so that your spine is straight. And then you can and don't do it yet, but you can stand up and move your arms. So if we did sitting, standing, and sitting again, and then a little movement and maybe a little chanting and a little meditation, is that all good for you guys? Okay. All right. So come into this kind of comfortable seated position and just close your eyes. And I'll give you a moment to settle. And you should not be leaning against the back of the chair so that your spine is erect. And I'm going to guide your attention for a moment. Okay? So, you can have your eyes open, of course, but if you have your eyes open, you're going to be distracted by your visual field. So if you're not willing to close your eyes, just partially close them. And I want you to link to some internal, what we call in sort of a Western language, introceptive awareness. So feel your bottom, your sit bones on the cushion. Most of you are on a cushion. And notice that you can actually direct your attention to your sit bones and the pressure of contact of your body weight on the chair. And from your sit bones, bring your attention, I'll try to listen more subtly, to your sacrum at the base of your spine. And while we do this, watch your attention. What normally will happen is that we'll go off into thought. We'll get distracted. So you want to try and stay focused. Feel or sense the returning, afferents, or is it efferents, that return to your brain from your nervous system in your sacrum, your somatic nervous system. And then perceive the low back. There are 5 vertebral bodies. One rises off the other. They rise off of S1, the top of the sacrum. There's L5, 4, 3, 2, 1. There's a curved lumbar segment. Just feel almost like you're a little mountain climber in your own spine, like a mini you. walking up the lumbar vertebral bodies. To the best of your ability, try to feel them very intimately. You can actually get to a point where you can mobilize the intervertebral spaces individually when you practice this. When you get towards the top of your lumbar spine, feel the curve of your thoracic spine. There are 12 a little bit smaller thoracic vertebral bodies that rise off of L1. The curve is in the opposite direction, more or less. There are also ribs connected to the processes of these vertebral bodies that wrap around and join the sternum in the front. This forms your thoracic cavity, so feel the thoracic spine. Then feel the shoulder girdle, that's your clavicle and scapula, resting on the thoracic and ribs as much as you're able. And now feel the cervical vertebral bodies. C7 rises off T1, they're smaller. It's harder to walk your awareness vertebra by vertebra up those 7 cervical vertebral bodies. But to, as intimately as possible, try to feel your spine. When you get to the top, it's sort of like the brainstem, the atlas axis area. Look down the cervical, thoracic, and lumbar spines back to your sacrum. From your sacrum back up your lumbar, thoracic, cervical spines to your brainstem. And then shift your attention, please, to the tip of your nose. Hold your spine in the backdrop of your awareness and feel the fact of the breath as it moves in and out. And just gently but progressively begin to deepen your inhalation and lengthen your exhalation. You guys know about that partial glottal constriction called, in Sanskrit, ujjayi. It sounds like this. It's just a partial constriction of the glottis that helps create a valve to help you lengthen the flow of breath. So if you know that, just apply a soft ujjayi. As you inhale and exhale, I'm going to guide you in a little biomechanics. So what I'd like to do is we'll just take about a dozen breaths now. And what I'd like you to do, please, is as you move through each breath, progressively lengthen the inhale and exhale comfortably until you reach a comfortable, let's say, maximum inhale, and let your exhale follow your inhale. And then I'm going to guide you a little biomechanically. So I'm going to show you a little about structure, a little about breath, and then a little about meditation in this practice. So as you're inhaling, feel the chest expand horizontally. And as your chest expands horizontally, and I'm going to keep inhaling and exhaling as I describe this. As your chest expands horizontally, feel like your rib cage lifts away from your pelvis, like it floats up and away from your pelvis. So you're feeling like you're getting a little taller with the inhale. I'll give you 2 more ideas. When you're inhaling and your chest is expanding horizontally, feel like you're lifting your sternum, that's front of your chest, away from your navel, and your curve of your thoracic spine is slightly flattening. So inhale, your chest expands horizontally, your ribs lift vertically, your chest lifts away from your navel, and your upper back flattens slightly. And as you're exhaling, continue that with inhale. As you exhale, tighten your belly from below your navel, like feel the area between your pubic bone and your navel, your abdominal wall, and tighten gently but progressively, bringing your belly in towards your spine. So as you're exhaling, bring the belly in towards the spine, then hold the belly there. As you start to inhale, expand your chest. And then as you're expanding your chest, release the belly on the same inhale. So you initiate the exhale, tightening the belly, pubic bone to navel, navel to solar plexus. At the end of your exhale, the belly's firm. Hold the belly firm as you initiate the inhale, expand the rib cage. Feel your ribs lift away from your pelvis, and then start to relax your belly from the solar plexus to the navel to the pubic bone. Let's do a few more breaths. Exhale, pubic bone to navel to solar plexus. When all the air is out, hold the belly firm. Inhale, expand your chest, feel your ribs lift. And then relax your belly from the solar plexus to the navel to the pubic bone. And just do 2 or 3 more breaths on your own. That is, what you're focusing on is the relationship between the flow of the breath and the movement of the spine. For us in Vinyasa Yoga, all the asana, it starts with this awareness about the relationship between the flow of the breath and the movement of the spine. So you can begin to feel intervertebral spaces if you gain this awareness. Okay, now just release the breath for a moment. Could you feel what I was asking you to feel? Some of you I know can, but it takes a little while. Now, this is going to be a multidimensional practice. So now I'm recovering, by the way, from a hairline fracture, so it's going to be difficult for me to demonstrate this in my foot, the fracture. But what I'm going to ask you to do is stand. It's not going to be hard, but I'm going to ask you to stand, and as you inhale simultaneously, so this takes focus, and I'm going to show you a contralateral movement just for fun, just to challenge you a bit. You know what contralateral is? So you'll see. I'm going to try. I'm simultaneously raising my heels as I raise my arms, but I'm raising one arm all the way. And then as I, watch what I do, don't do it yet. When I exhale, I'm lowering my arm, and then when they're parallel, simultaneously lowering my arms and my heels. So there's a simultaneity about the arm movement, the heel movement, and the breath. Except that I shouldn't be doing this. And then as I exhale, so my heels don't touch until my hands reach the bottom when my exhale's over. So we're going to do that, and then I'm going to do it like this. I'm going to chant when you inhale, and you're going to chant what I just chanted on exhale. Then we'll take that into meditation, okay? So stand like this, feet parallel, and the width of your hips, knees, and ankles kind of stacked, joints aligned. You're going to have your eyes a little open for this so you have balance, but just look ahead of you, like pick a point to gaze at. So let me take you first through the movement. So wherever you are in your breath cycle, don't move yet. Inhale fully. And now exhale. When you exhale, engage your belly, tighten your belly. Now inhale. As you inhale, raise both arms all the way as you raise both heels. Let's do that part first. So your heels. Now as you exhale, lower your arms and your heels, and don't let your heels touch the floor until your arms reach your waist when the exhale's over. So you're coordinating them. Try that again. Inhale up. One full inhale, raise your arms and your heels. And pause. Hold the breath a moment. Now exhale. Lower your arms and heels simultaneously. So don't touch your heels until your hands reach your thighs. Now the half one. Take a free breath. Go ahead and inhale and exhale. When you inhale next, you're going to do that. So let's take the right arm all the way. So now inhale, raise your arms and heels. Both arms halfway, right arm all the way. This takes focus because it's not the traditional pattern. Then exhale. Start to lower the heels in the right arm. When they're parallel, continue lowering the heels in the other arm too. Got that? Inhale, go up. Exhale, come down. Now, are you willing to chant? Take a free breath. So what's going to happen is I'm going to chant, and when I chant, you inhale up. And when you exhale, I'm going to translate this, and we're going to take it into meditation, I promise you. And I'm not converting you into anything except who you already are, okay? So I'm going to chant, and when I go up, and then you just chant exactly what I chanted, the same length of time as it sounds like I chanted, and come back down, okay? So you're coordinating breath, movement, and chanting. Got that? Everybody okay? All right, so stand like this. Wherever you are in your breath cycle, inhale fully, and then exhale. When I chant, you inhale up. 2 words, you'll hear it. Go ahead. Om Satyam. Om Satyam. Can you remember this part? When I chant, go back up. Om Chaitanyam. Om Chaitanyam. Inhale up. Om Anandam. Exhale down. Om Anandam. Last time. Inhale up. Om Atma. Om Atma. Can we do one last round? You know, that was 2 times, right? One time one side, one time the other. That's 1 round. So we did 2 rounds. Can we do it one more time? All right. Inhale fully, and exhale when I chant. Inhale up. Om Satyam.
Om
Satyam. Inhale up. The other side. Om Chaitanyam. Inhale up. Go back to the first side. Om Anandam. Anandam. Inhale up. Last time. Om Atma. Okay, now sit again. Now, when I chant, you mentally chant with me, not verbally, and you inhale. Remember how I told you to inhale, chant, expand the chest, relax the belly? When I chant, you mentally chant with me, and you exhale. So don't chant on exhale, just mentally chant. So we'll do inhale, Om Satyam Chaitanyam, and then I'll chant again, and you'll exhale, and you'll mentally chant with me, not verbally, Om Anandam Atma, okay? And then we'll do the whole chant on inhale and the whole chant on exhale. We'll do a few breaths, and then we'll go into meditation. I'll translate it for you. So wherever you are in your breath cycle, please inhale fully. As you exhale, engage your belly, bring your belly in. When I chant, you inhale. Om Satyam Chaitanyam. Pause a moment at the end of the inhale. When I chant, you exhale and mentally chant with me. Om Anandam Atma. Again, inhale. Om Satyam Chaitanyam. Exhale. Om Anandam Atma. One more time. Om Satyam Chaitanyam. Exhale. Om Anandam Atma. So stay in really focused. I'm going to do a rough translation and then take you on a visual, kind of a guided visualization meditation. So, and I'll keep this very simple, so don't get intellectual, just listen. You just chanted Om. Om invokes who you truly are as pure awareness. Not awareness of, but awareness itself. Satyam means real, true. It exists. Your pure awareness is true, truly who you are. It's real. Chaitanyam means, chit means consciousness or awareness. So the characteristic of who you truly are is pure awareness. That's Chaitanyam. The experience of pure awareness is unconditional. That's Anandam. It's innately joyful. It's unconditional. And that is your true nature as Atman. You are the unchanging source of pure awareness. That's your true identity. So now I'm going to guide you in a little visualization. Visualization implies sight, but actually to make it more effective, and it's a training to develop the visualization muscle, it's multiple senses. So I'm going to ask you to close your eyes if they're open now, and just imagine that you're walking in the woods, in the hills. There's beautiful hills around here. So you're walking in the woods, in the hills. And sort of visualize trees and the forest floor, maybe hear the wind in the trees or smell the earth. And see yourself walking uphill. And as you walk uphill, listen and you hear a subtle, soft sound of like bubbling water. And imagine that you're looking and you see a spring, a pure spring bubbling up from the depth of the earth. Maybe you can smell or taste the humidity or sense that it's a little different there. And look at the spring and see how crystal clear that pure water is as it bubbles up from the earth. And if you look above the spring, there's no river leading to it. It's really coming up from the earth, and it's pure and crystal clear. Now, I'd like you to imagine or recognize that pure bubbling spring as a symbol of your own birth in this life, when you emerged from the mystery of your mother's womb, just like this water emerges from the depth of Mother Earth. Look at how pure, clear that water is. That's your pure being, your pure consciousness as you were born, as you emerged from your mother's womb. That's you as Atman. What I'd like you to do is look at that spring and see that there's a little, as the water fills the spring, a little stream emerges moving downhill from the spring. And I'd like you to look at that stream and start to walk downhill following that stream. And what I'd like you to do is try to make it as real as you can. Imagine or remember your earliest childhood memories. Now, our friend talked about childhood trauma, so I'm not asking you to look necessarily at those memories, but just walk down the stream. As you walk down the stream, trace your earliest childhood memories all the way back to when you were that pure infant being, if you can. Many of us can, many of us cannot. And walk your awareness down the river, down the stream rather, and see it merging with other streams when you first made your first little friends. And as you keep walking down this stream, see it start to merge with the river of your life as you went from infancy to toddler years, from toddler years to adolescence, to young adulthood. So this can take a long time. We don't have a long time now. Just notice what comes up. The more you do that, other memories emerge. See what comes up. And see yourself merging with the river of your own life. And flow from those earliest childhood memories down the river of your own life to this moment. Something led you to become who you are now, the choices that you made, the actions that you took. Something you heard, you encountered yoga, something motivated you to come even to this moment in time here with each other, all of us together. So just take a moment to bring yourself into the present. Here you are, that same pure being that emerged from the mystery of your mother's womb. That pure being is who you are still, right this moment, in this time and space location. So sitting here in the moment of your life, look forward down the river. You know where it's headed. The river is inexorably heading back to the sea, where you will merge back with your source. The journey, we don't know how long it is between now and the merging with the ocean. But know that the quality of the journey from here on is up to you. You can influence the quality by your choices, how you act, how you emote, who you communicate with, what you communicate about, what you think about is going to influence the quality of your journey. So looking forward from where you are in this moment in time for the rest of the journey of your life until you merge back with your source, ask yourself, what is it important for you to accomplish before you reach the sea? What do you want to achieve? So that when you do reach the end, it will be with a sense of fulfillment, of peace, of gratitude, maybe even of curiosity about what's next. And then how can yoga or contemplative studies and health practices support you on this journey? But recognize that who you were as you emerged from your mother's womb, as you went through your childhood years into your adolescence and through that challenging hormonal changes into your adulthood, all the way to now, wherever you are in your own life journey, you are that same pure being, and you will be that being. And that is the only thing that you'll take with you as you enter or merge back with your source. So let that inspire you to make the choices so that you have the experience that will help you arrive at that last moment with a sense of fulfillment and completion. So the way we'll end this, just little taste of yoga practice, an integrated yoga practice, will be that I'll chant that mantra, which, remember, really just affirms who you are as that source of pure awareness. You mentally chant it with me, then I'll chant it again, and we'll chant it together softly the second time, and then we'll chant it out loud, and that'll be the end. We'll end with just Om. So when you hear me, just mentally chant. And notice how I do it, because that's how we'll then do it the second 2 times. Om Satyam Chaitanyam Anandam Atma. Together softly. Om Satyam Chaitanyam Anandam Atma. A little louder. Om Satyam Chaitanyam Anandam Atma. And one last time. Om Satyam Chaitanyam Anandam Atma. And just end Om. So just take a moment to enter the room. Just a little taste. It was asana, pranayama, chanting, meditation. Generalized, obviously, for us. Kind of in honor, my friend Turtle showed up, and I just came from Yogaville. So, you know, the guru, the elder that started that is Satchit Ananda. That's what we just chanted. Satchit Ananda is not only his name, it's all of our names, our true name as pure consciousness. Om is really who we are. That's the Vedic insight, part of Vedic revelation. You guys okay? Did you actually do it? Did you have the memory? And because it's your journey down the river of life, right? We're heading. My teacher used to say this: everything we have and everything we love, we're going to lose, and everyone we love is going to die, and then we're going to die. So let that guide your choices. I was a kid when he told me that, so. I don't think there were people that couldn't hang out there because it was too intense for them to think about that. Anyway, any last comments or questions? I think we have spent an hour and a half together. I wish you well in your journey of this life. I lived in Italy a lot, and they used to say in South Italy, if I don't see you again, may you have a nice death. And have fun along the way. If you're interested in this work, we have articles and stuff that I've written. Like I did write an article for IJYT on the difference between a yoga class and a yoga therapy session, and the difference between a yoga teacher training program and a yoga therapy training program. And there's other articles too. When I worked with a woman that had graft versus host syndrome and an extraordinarily difficult multidimensional work. So that there was an article about that, how to work with somebody with that kind of condition. It also talks about the practice that came to me when I was going through the brain surgery. So there's a bunch of articles there and products on meditation and pranayama if you're interested. And I'll say one last thing. My real dharma is training teachers and therapists. And we're starting a new round of programming next month in Austin, Texas. And Robin has information if anybody wants to find out about it. You'd be welcome to join us. Thank you guys and all the best. Yes, sir.
Yes, it's a great gift for you to teach these people how to reach in the grass spirit. But America is a suffering state. They love to suffer. That's why we have Mondays, which is really the same as Fridays. And just to be able to give them back is remarkable in this short space.
Thank you. Thank you, Wandering. This is Wandering Turtle, and I'll say no more.
Wandering turtle?
Yeah. He's not like us. He's a two-legged like us. He's not a four-legged. Yeah.
So I'm just curious about if you've either thought about this or experienced working with people in the deaf community
Yeah.
and how this type of event can be accessible for them. Have you experienced it?
Sure. First of all, so I've also worked with, actually interesting, I had one student who was blind, so that's a challenge to teach asana to a blind student. So I want to say that, and related specifically to chanting, because for the rest it's communicating, and we're communicating beautifully because of this great human being. Let me just add something though. But in the tradition, what they say about chanting is loud is good, soft is better, silent is best. So we need to do it out loud because we're distracted. Like in India, when they do puja in the morning, they ring a bell, and they say that's to wake God up, but that's just a joke, because God's always awake. It's about waking us up. So loud helps call our attention. So we go from loud to soft to silent as an interiorization of attention. So really, that's the only reason we need to do it out loud, is to help interiorize attention. I mean, of course, external chanting creates vibration, and that vibration creates circulation. So there is a value in chanting out loud in terms of circulation. And actually, you can, like ultrasound, increasing circulation into relatively non-vascular tissue. Chanting does create internal circulation. But for the inner work, silence is actually better. So it's just more challenging for your attention. I'm not sure if this is what you're asking. I mean, the obvious thing is about the vocalization of sound. Is there something more? Did I understand, or?
I'm just curious if there are other ways to experience, what you were talking about internally without incorporating sound.
Yeah.
And how we can make that become real silence. Because obviously, what I experience inside of me is always very loud, but I don't hear anything. So I'm just curious, the purpose of chanting, is it the meaning that sound is actually very critical? Is that a critical piece to it?
This is a beautiful question.
Do you have to have that? Because that's my question.
Yes. So first, I'm going to talk a little bit about sound and chanting. I'm happy that you asked this question, but I want to say something first. I used to ask this when I was young in India because I have most people do, congenital scoliosis. You understand scoliosis? Spine is it's not perfectly straight. Of course, most people have it. So I used to ask my teacher, does that mean my central channel, that inner esoteric subtle body central channel, is crooked? And he used to laugh at me. Your subtle body is perfect, he used to say. It doesn't matter, if somebody has a deviated septum and they can't do Nadi Shodhana, is that going to impact their subtle body? And he used to just laugh. He said, no. So whether you can hear or not is not relevant to this work. But the sound is a tool to help focus the mind. And if you're silent and your mind's distracted, we would say that I don't know the answer to how you can you repeat? So I have a question for you. Can you repeat words in your mind? Did you ever hear them, or were you deaf from birth?
Yes, I was born deaf completely.
Okay, so when you think in your own mind is not in verbal sounds, it's not in words, but it's in some way, some image, or how is it that you think in your mind?
It's going to be difficult to explain, but I didn't expect to have an answer for you today. I guess I just was looking for some assistance with my own journey in terms of yoga, and I just was thinking.
Well, so look, I mean, it would be interesting to get to know you more, to understand more deeply how your mind works, but
I'm happy to do that.
but what I would say is that the power of internal reflection in whichever way you do it, and then finding a symbol, if you understand the concept of symbol, that speaks to your heart, and repeating that over and over again can help you connect more deeply to something that will give you that peace or fulfillment. So that's the way I would begin to think about it.
So I'll have to get your email address then, and we will stay in touch.
I want to thank you guys for your pleasant humor and your patience, and thank you for inviting me here, Julia, and I really I'm honored that you came, and thanks coming from Tim for coming. And I have a lot of joy in my heart for seeing what you guys are up to, and I'm excited about the potential for the future, sincerely. Yeah. Thank you, guys.